The security line at Denver International Airport was long, impatient travelers, echoing announcements, rolling suitcases, and sighs of frustration. But amid the chaos, one man stood calm. Captain David Coleman, 42, crisp uniform, navy hat under his arm, ID lanyard tucked neatly into his shirt. He was heading to the gate to captain Flight 263 to New York. It wasn't his first flight of the day, but it was one he'd never forget. As he walked through the terminal, he noticed 2 airport guards watching him closely. He nodded politely. "Morning." They didn't nod back. He kept walking, unaware that within minutes, those same guards would be sprinting toward him, shouting, tackling him to the ground, right in front of hundreds of stunned passengers. And when he stood up, dusting off his uniform, what he did next would silence the entire terminal, and leave the guards wishing they had looked just 1 second longer. Because when Captain David Coleman reached into his jacket, he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out his pilot's badge. And that was just the beginning of the storm that would follow. David had been flying for 16 years. Air Force veteran. Flight instructor. Commercial captain. He'd faced storms, engine failures, and overnight delays. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened that morning. He'd been running slightly behind schedule after a maintenance meeting. Instead of entering through the crew entrance, he used the main terminal, common for connecting pilots. He carried his pilot's uniform jacket over one arm, coffee in the other. As he walked past the group of passengers, a voice called out, "Hey! Sir! You can't go there!" He turned. 2 security guards were hurrying toward him. "I'm with the airline," David said calmly. "I'm heading to gate C12 for flight 263. One guard squinted. "Where's your ID?" He reached into his pocket. "Right here." "Put your hands where we can see them," the guard shouted suddenly. People stopped. Phones came out. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" David froze, raising his hands slightly. "It's okay, I'm Captain Coleman. I fly for this airline." "Yeah, and I'm the president," the other guard sneered. Before he could react, they lunged. Coffee splashed across the floor. David stumbled backward, one knee hitting the ground. "Hey!" he protested. "What are you doing? Stop resisting!" one guard yelled, pressing him down. Passengers gasped. A child started crying. "Please," David said, breathless. "Check my lanyard. My ID." But his voice was drowned out by commands and chaos. Finally, a voice cut through the noise. "What is going on here?" Everyone turned. A flight attendant, Rachel, one of David's crew members, stood frozen near the gate, eyes wide in disbelief. "That's our captain!" she shouted. The guards paused, stunned. "What?" Rachel rushed forward, holding up her crew ID. "He's the pilot for Flight 263. Let him go!" They hesitated, then released him. David stood, straightened his uniform, and pulled his pilot's ID from his pocket. He held it up slowly, voice calm but shaking with anger. "Here's my badge," he said. "You just tackled the man who's supposed to fly your next flight." The terminal was silent. Dozens of phones were recording. One passenger whispered, "He's actually the pilot." Another muttered, "This is going viral." David stared at the guards, still panting from the adrenaline. One of them stammered, "Sir, we didn't know." He interrupted, voice low and controlled. "You didn't ask." A supervisor arrived moments later. "Captain Coleman, I am so sorry. We'll handle this immediately." But David shook his head. "No, you won't. You'll file a report, close it quietly, and pretend it didn't happen, like the last time this happened to someone else." The supervisor blinked. "Last time?" David nodded. "You think this is the first time a black pilot's been mistaken for a threat in uniform?" The guard tried to speak, but David raised a hand. "Save it. I've got a flight to operate." He turned to Rachel. "How's boarding?" She hesitated. "We're ready when you are, Captain." As he walked away, people parted like the Red Sea, silent, ashamed. He climbed into the cockpit, placed his cap on the dashboard, and exhaled. Rachel lingered at the door. "You okay?" He smiled faintly. "I've flown through worse storms." But the storm wasn't over. When Flight 263 landed in New York 4 hours later, reporters were already waiting. Someone had uploaded the entire incident online, 3 million views in 6 hours. Headlines exploded. "Black pilot tackled at airport, while in uniform." "Captain Coleman speaks out, they didn't see a pilot. They saw a threat." The airline released a statement. "We are deeply sorry for the treatment of Captain Coleman. The guards involved have been placed on leave pending investigation." But David didn't want apologies. He wanted awareness. He gave a short interview. "I've flown over oceans, through lightning, across continents. But the turbulence that hurts the most is the kind that comes from ignorance. I didn't flash my badge to prove who I am. I flashed it to remind people that uniform or not, dignity deserves recognition." Weeks later, the airport introduced a mandatory training program called "See the Person, Not the Profile." David was invited to speak at its first session. He stood in front of hundreds of guards, agents, and airline staff, the same kind of people who tackled him that day. He looked around the room and said, "I don't want sympathy. I want systems that see us. Because when judgment moves faster than understanding, everyone's safety and humanity is at risk." The room erupted in applause. And that day, Captain David Coleman didn't just command a plane. He commanded respect. By the end of the month, David's story had reached global audiences. News outlets called him the pilot who landed dignity. But he always corrected them. "Dignity doesn't need landing," he'd say. "It was always there. People just need to stop pushing it off the runway." The guards later sent handwritten apologies. One even wrote, "You taught me more in 5 minutes than any training ever did." David didn't respond, but he kept the letter. Not out of anger, but as a reminder. Because every day he walked through that terminal now, other travelers noticed. They smiled. They saluted. And sometimes he'd see a young kid staring up at him, a kid who looked just like he did, and he'd nod and say softly, "You can fly too, son. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." If you saw someone being judged before being understood, would you step in or stay silent? Tell me in the comments, because silence can be the strongest turbulence of all. If you believe respect should come before reaction, hit like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us. The real flight we all take is learning to see each other clearly.